also the launch, that is, of the report. I was reading through it, and really there is so much that Ugandans need to know, but that will be a meal for another day.
Oh, okay, fine.
So today, let's look at the recent issue at the Electoral Commission, where we saw you before the floor of Parliament, and here you are looking at your budget for the next elections. But I want to be more critical and pick out the segment of local councils, that is 1 and 2, where I had a budget of 90 billion. And the government is saying, Minister of Finance, we can only offer you 36 of this.
First, like you said, we wanted to congratulate the Commission. Yeah, we would broaden it and congratulate Ugandans on having successfully participated and concluded the general elections program, because we did this together. Yeah, it's in order. It's in order to say congratulations, because it's a constitutional timeline obligation, and it's an exercise we needed to do within the time frame set by the Constitution, and it was challenging because there was COVID. So on concluding those elections, we joined to salute Ugandans, the government, the people of Uganda, and of course the Electoral Commission being in the lead, organizing and conducting the elections. Yeah, but like you said, we've not really been silent or quiet. Immediately after the elections, we embarked on evaluation of the exercise. How did the exercise go? And this is an activity we did between August last year and September, 2 months, perhaps through to October, and then wrote a report. That is the evaluation of how was the elections conducted, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything that happened, so that it helps us to learn lessons and strengthen strong areas and then work on areas that are weak. But at the same time, we're also preparing a report on the election, which we issued to government through Parliament and through our line minister, through the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. It's out there, it's on the website, and the hard copies are available as well for stakeholders. And I think it will help us to look at how every detail was worked on. At the same time, we've been planning for the next level of elections, which you have mentioned, because local council elections, administrative units elections, which is LC1 and LC2, as well as women councils elections, were conducted in July 2018. They also have a 5-year term, which is coming to an end in July 2023. So we've indicated that part of our activities this coming financial year, 2022-2023, will be the conduct of LC1 elections. And for that reason, we gave the figures which are required to organize and conduct the elections at the grassroots level. And that's what we presented to Parliament, which you have mentioned as 90 billion shillings, yes.
Paul, one would look at the criteria of these elections being queuing up. And one of the elements there is to reduce on expenditure. Now, I'm reliably informed, but I stand to be corrected, that in 2016 when we had them, 2018, sorry, when we had them, that was in July, when we had them, the Commission used less than 30 billion shillings. What could have escalated the figures to be estimated at 90 billion?
Yes, I've not carried out the figures to look at and compare that, but certainly I know that we submitted a budget of about 90 billion. LC1 elections, administrative units elections include LC1 and LC2, and then of course along the same exercise we conduct women councils elections. These are elections that also move from the village up to the national level. You know, we also organize elections for women councils and committees. And there is a national women's committee at the apex at the national level. So we have shown how what we need to do to prepare and conduct these elections. And also one elections, unlike what most people think, are elections. They follow, you know, the principles of elections, except that their mode is by lining up. Now, lining up doesn't mean that people will just be told a date in June or July. By the way, the indicative date, the period within which we'll set a polling is June and July 2023. So it's not that you just come up and say, go and line up. These are elections for which the basic principles of organizing and conducting elections are still followed. And we've of course indicated that there's been an increase in the number of villages. These elections are conducted at the village level. If you want to get a picture I could even say that their elections are logistically bigger than even presidential elections.
Because they're conducting, by then, there were over 70,000 villages.
Now there were 60, then there were 60 plus villages, 1,000 villages across the country. Now there are more than 70,000 villages across the country. If you compare that, every village is a polling station. Every village is a polling station, as opposed to general elections, for example, parliamentary, where we have 34,000 polling stations. We can put several villages together at a polling station. So by their nature, administrative units, every village has its council, which composes, which now becomes a polling station on its own. And so if you look at what is required to organize and conduct these elections in a manner that meets the principles of organizing fair elections, then you need to employ personnel. First of all, we need, before we even get there, we're going to do a village voters register, a village residents register. It is different from the national voters register, which has people within a parish. This one has only members of the village. We will be giving more details as we go along. So a village voters register, compiling it, making sure it is well compiled with officials who are well trained and facilitated, and those are all cost areas. They are cost drivers in this program. Then, of course, voter education. We also learned a lot from the last conduct of the election. So we want to prepare early enough and do adequate sensitization, because they are critical level of elections. Otherwise, they would not be conducted. They are very, very important elections. So we want to give them the attention they deserve, including voter education, stakeholder engagement, besides considering the challenges we have of organizing elections in compliance with the SOPs, standard operating procedures, to prevent the spread of COVID-19. So we have indicated areas where the money will be spent. And for that reason, we've indicated the figure that is required to organize and conduct these elections effectively. We presented it. It is not just an increase that has come out of the blue, but yeah, there's an increase in number of villages across the country, but we're not conducting only LC1 elections, we're conducting women councils elections as well.
The fear now for many Ugandans, if these monies are not met in the required time, because now that means you have a gap of about 66 billion. That is a very big margin in case you don't get the money. Then what could be the way forward, Paul? Are we going back to yet another 16 or plus years minus legitimate people in office?
Yeah, I think our budget will be considered and discussed. It is out there. It can be looked at critically by everyone, stakeholders, so that we come to, an understanding and the elections are facilitated. Because, when you talk about LC1 elections and the budget that is required, you need to look at them as critical elections within our electoral calendars as a country, grassroots elections. I don't want to speculate that we will not get the required funding, but of course we would love to have the money that we've indicated, because it clearly shows how it will be spent. The discussions have started, and that's good, and it's okay to question our processes and our budgets. But of course, I believe that after that process, there will be consideration by stakeholders. It is important that LC1 elections are organized and conducted effectively and in a manner that means the minimum standards for free elections. Otherwise, we've learned lessons from the last exercise, including elections whose results were challenged, and some went up to High Court. LC1 elections, they go up to High Court, and other reports that came out, including lack of voter education, enough sensitization of stakeholders on these elections. So if this is the grassroots election and we indicate that it requires this kind of funding, I think the stakeholders will consider that and they'll provide the funds.
One of the documents that I've read and enjoyed reading is this report. This one, very interesting report. I don't know if every Ugandan can get access to it. And the report I'm referring to is the Republic of Uganda, the Electoral Commission report of 2020-2021 general elections. And one of the highlights in this report is not enough funds. And some of the problems that we saw have been alluded to inefficient or sufficient funds that are not enough. Now, Paul, one would think that Electoral Commission maybe tops the agenda. I was one time discussing with my colleague and he told me we shouldn't even care of how much we put when it comes to elections because it is the wheel on which we ensure everything goes ahead. How then do you manage? Do you reduce standards? How do you go about with insufficient funds or not enough to do what is required for the basic standards?
Of course, Electoral Commission is mindful of the context where we are and on the Ugandan, economic and setting, the challenges, the resource envelope, if you could call it that. We know we can't get everything we want. And we're also not extravagant in our budgeting because we really consider it. But we've learned lessons from the first exercise that was conducted. And actually, if you want to see why and how our budgeting is considerate and reflects, careful planning. If you want to know why the elections were delayed earlier and could not be held, it's because the budget was almost in 500 billion shillings. So the fact that it has come down now, we're talking about even less than 100 billion. It shows that a few areas have been really cut out so that there is wise spending and, considerate spending given the realities of our resource envelope. But in this area, as a result of the conduct of the first elections by lining up, we learned lessons and we don't want to see the same things happening without us taking interventions. And for that reason, we will put emphasis on preparing our officials who will conduct the village resident registers, compilation of the village residents register. We print a lot of material even for else-one elections because these are elections for which need to be documented at every level. Actually, else-one elections also follow the normal electoral process. We compile a village voters register, we display it, and on polling we appoint officials, we nominate candidates, we will be announcing results, we file them, we record them, we document them because these are officials. Remember, the local government minister takes them up, give them stamps, and they play a role in the administration at the lower levels. So it's very foundational and we give it enough attention. And then remember, of course, what I've told you. We also learned lessons last time from people lining up and us not having enough officials to do the counting, for security purposes, and for all the transparency that we needed to have. And if a line has only one person and it goes beyond, and all those factors, we've learned lessons. We want to provide for them in this coming cycle so that we improve on the delivery of the election, even if it's by lining up. It should be done in a manner that reflects the basic principles or that meets the minimum principles of democratic elections. And for that reason, I think, like I said, we don't want to speculate that we will have challenges. We presented the budget. We are starting on preparatory processes, and we think that there will be support from stakeholders and Parliament and the Minister of Finance.
Well, I've also read a few cases that have gone to court. Now let's look at the case in point LCs. And one of the issues where the Electoral Commission is part of most of these cases, to one level or the other, there is an inclusion of an official, either who mismanaged or who did this not knowingly. And one of the things when I was interviewing, they told us late recruitment. That sometimes these people do not go through the do's and don'ts in time. They're recruited late. Then also one link hinted on low pay to some of these people. He told me, Robert, you're at a polling station. I don't want to mention the figures, unless you want to. And then here comes a scenario where maybe someone's coming in for bribery. That the Electoral Commission, two things: delayed recruitment of staff that are going to participate in these elections, but also sometimes what to take home is very minimal.
Yeah, first of all, it is not true that we do not recruit in time. The else-one elections actually have a roadmap, and we'll be issuing it in a short while. It has a roadmap which indicates the period within which we'll undertake certain activities. Of course, recruitment is very key, and like I've indicated already, with about 70,000 villages, we're going to give the final figure for purposes of these elections. But already with about 70,000 villages, you can even see the volume of staff personnel that we'll need to recruit on a temporary basis. And also how much in terms of allowances we'll need to give them. That is also an area that describes, becomes a cost driver and brings in the expenses.
Because usually you do not have, these are not permanent staff of that.
They are temporary officials.
They are temporary, yes.
And we'll have to recruit them, we'll have to train them and to deploy them. So we have a program and roadmap that will indicate exactly those timelines, including timely recruitment. We recruit in time. We recruit in time, we train in time, but we also want to improve on those areas where we saw gaps in our recruitment and also in the training, because certain things have changed since 2018, including now the realities of COVID-19 and other guidelines that we'll be issuing. I don't want to get there when we're still finalized, because this program practically starts in the next financial year, which is from July 2022, and the elections, actual polling will take place on a date we'll choose between June and July 2023. So those are areas that have are very important, and they explain also why we need adequate funding, so that we get the right caliber of persons who can take the allowance we have. Although now when it comes to allowances, it is a very complicated matter, and it becomes even a personal matter, and for some, at some level, an ethical issue, because even when you give someone 100,000 shillings as an allowance, they will still, if someone comes and tells him or her that I want you to give me an advantage, and then they can, it comes back now to the person. But the guidelines are here, clear, the code of conduct is clear, and what is supposed to be done is clear. And I think we will need to emphasize those, but basically also appeal to the workers. We take disciplinary actions, we take administrative action, and sometimes, yeah, we've been taken to courts of law, like I've mentioned, and our viewers need to know, else-one elections, petitions have gone from the lowest courts, from magistrates to chief magistrate, up to high court. And there have even been some cases that have even gone on appeal. So that's how critical else-one election is. We want to organize it in with adequate funding and give it the time that it requires to sensitize the voters and do our part, because we need to do it according to the law.
Well, in the interest of time, let me have your parting shot to Ugandans out there regarding these elections, but also your cry out to the people you believe will be able to push this budget as desired by the Electoral Commission.
Fellow Ugandans, I think by now we've realized the importance of else-ones in our communities, and leaders at else-one. Your term is 5 years, and we are moving into the final year, and the elections will be organized and conducted. They'll be conducted between June and July next year. So prepare. Political parties which give us candidates, I think, need to notice that, and we put them on notice and to prepare for that purpose, because some of the challenges we have also relate to political parties and the issues that they have internally. So the roadmap will be out shortly. But we appeal to our stakeholders out there to consider our submission and provide funding for this, as well as other stakeholders who work with us to complement our work, supplement our work, civil society organizations that are involved in voter education and training. I think you are now on notice. You can organize yourself and make sure you meet the requirements for accreditation to support voter education. Otherwise, I appreciated that it's now coming up as a matter for discussion, because it is an important election in our structures.
I want to thank you, Paul Bukenya, and of course you, our viewer, who has been with us from the hour of 6:30 till now. Well, Ruben will be next with sports, but just want to urge you that let's give due diligence these elections the attention, the funding they desire. Have a lovely day.